Hi everybody, it's MattHawes of TheHappyShow and Comics Unlimited in Evansville, Indiana. If you hear traffic sounds, that's because I'm outside. Go ahead and decide to come out today and sit out for a little bit with the weather. It's actually been pretty hot lately and pretty humid in this area. But today, while it's still kind of hot, it's the lowest it's been for a while, in the low 80s. And the temperature is, well, the temperature is kind of high, the humidity is low, so it actually feels pretty nice. And I decided, well, what the heck? I'm under some shade in a sense. I got my fenced in here, but anyway, the reason I decided to do this vlog was I was going to go ahead and mention a little bit about the early days of YouTube, since I've mentioned that, or said that I would talk about that in the previous video. Back whenever I first started on YouTube, it was actually, I think, around my birthday in July of 2006. And at that point, as I understand it, the website had just been around almost a year, right around a year. I don't know how long it took for average users to get on it beyond the developers. I'm not sure the exact launch date, but it was in 2005. And I know I commented on a video by Steve Chen, who was one of the founders. I'm drawing a blank right now, though I normally had Steve Chen, and I'm trying to remember. Anyway, I'm going blank on the three founders' names. It used to be I remember them all, but it's been a while since I thought about the early days of YouTube. So anyway, there was back in 2006, like I say, YouTube had been around that long, and a friend of mine, he had brought it up to me. I wasn't even aware of it. This is so early on. A lot of people may not even think about this nowadays, or if you're too young, you don't even realize this, but U2 was, the popular Irish rock and roll band. And back in those days, when YouTube was just starting, if you were a person on YouTube, you were an early YouTuber, and you tried to tell other people about it, most of them looked at you weird and said, you too, and they confused it with the band, the rock band. That's how far we've come, because you never hear that kind of confusion anymore. In fact, I think it might happen more the other way. If you try to bring up U2, the band, in a conversation, people might get confused, like you're talking about YouTube more often than the other way around anymore. And my friend told me about YouTube, and I said, the band? So he said that they were putting up videos, and I had already done the public access TV show, The Happy Show, starting in 2003, and I put up episodes on a local television there, local public access, but that was only broadcasting in the Evansville area, as is public television, public access television. Let me clarify that. It's for the local community. So it was only seen in the Evansville tri-state area, and this was a way to get YouTube was a way to get out further. And videos, there have been channels and stuff you could upload videos to in the early 2000s, but it was not common, and wasn't likely to get many views. Usually maybe you could upload it to a message board or some site like that. And so this was a novel idea, and it was made with the idea of just an average person using it. And that's what's so interesting about the change in the evolution of YouTube over the years. It's now very much corporate, very much commercial. The average person can still use it. They still have free accounts. The majority is free accounts. Now they do charge for YouTube TV and other special things that they do nowadays. It's owned by Google, of course. I think it's still owned by Google, but it's owned by major corporations and stuff. And back then, it was owned by those three guys. Was this Mike? I'm really trying to remember the other guy's name. Steve. There was Steve Chen and Mike. Maybe Mike. Like I said, it's been years. I again, knew off the top of my head, but the three guys who started it, they started, I thought, as a way to share videos with their other friends and family of just anything, life things. And then quickly, a lot of people who were already doing blogs back in those days decided to do vlogs, video blogs. And that's what a lot of the YouTube's early days were. There was homegrown entertainers, people just realizing, hey, I could put my stuff out there and maybe be seen. A lot of it was, like I said, vlogging. It was strongly a vlogging community in the beginning, where just somebody would talk like I'm doing right now to the camera without any fancy editing. Very much like what I'm doing right now, because I'm not going to edit this or whatever. And you just yacked about their day-to-day life and everything like that. Now, oddly enough, I wasn't a vlogger in the beginning, though I did start doing semi-regular vlogs. Maybe I could say regular vlogs, but it still was tied into TheHappyShow, my public access TV show, because what I would do is I'd put up originally segments from the show, and then full episodes. And see, this is another thing, for those of you, again, too young to know, or those of you who don't remember and never knew back in the day, YouTube, you couldn't, waiting for that to pass by, YouTube, you couldn't put more than, I think it was 10 minutes. I think no more than 15 for sure. I think it was a 10-minute limit. You couldn't put more than 10 minutes of video. I think it was like 100 megabytes was the largest size video quality. If you ever watch a YouTube video from 2006, 2007, and maybe even 2008, I forget when they changed things, but as far as how much footage, time length and how much video quality you could upload. But if you see something certainly from 2005, especially from 2005, but even 2006 up to 2007, and you think, man, the videos back then looked piss poor, it wasn't necessarily because the camera or the people were uploading poor quality videos intentionally. They couldn't upload high quality videos. You had a limit. Again, this was before YouTube was bought by a corporation, and there wasn't endless bandwidth or anything like that. So there's understandable reasons, but they had time limits and file size limits that almost are non-existent today. Or if there is still limits, I don't even know if there's still limits on file sizes and length of videos, because YouTube has grown so large that if there is, it's a limit that's so much that the average person wouldn't need to make longer videos longer videos, or need a file size larger than that, unless because I think YouTube can handle 4K and everything these days. So when I started, I thought, wow, this is a chance to get my footage out there. I kind of thought this could be like a public access on through the internet, where just everybody, average user, can put up their own stuff. Because again, public access is, I forgot if I mentioned this a minute ago, for those who might not be totally aware or confused, public access is not public television, not PBS, like the channel that shows Sesame Street or anything like that. Public access, also called local access, is a thing available, I think, in every single community, like every single state and cities, the bigger cities especially, where there are cable providers that are supposed to allow a channel for community to make their own videos. It's basically to give the little man their own voice, so to speak. And a lot of church groups will use it for their programs. Here in Evansville, a lot of people think it's the church channel, because it's predominantly used by church groups. And then other people make their own oddball shows. Tom Green, I mentioned in a previous video when I talked about this, Tom Green, even though he's from Canada, they got public access, I guess, up there. Tom Green did his own public access show. That's where he first started out in entertainment, and then progressed to MTV when they saw, I guess, his show. And there's a lot of public access shows. Some actually progressed to a bigger show. I can't remember the one, but it was on MTV, but it was another offbeat public access show from New York and Chicago and California, as would be expected. A lot of them actually have people who've done public access, but because they're in such a big city to begin with, they actually have a level of true celebrity that came from it, even though it's still limited compared to the celebrity of a nationally known star. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, even though that tangent was for a reason, to explain about public access and how it relates in my mind, to the early YouTube, where YouTube became a place where you could give a voice to the average person, the average performer, and such. Again, a lot of people use it for vlogs. I would say the majority of people used it for vlogs in the early days. In fact, so many people use it for vlogs that there was almost a kind of snootiness with some people that, you know, if you didn't do vlogs like this, you're somehow going against what it's supposed to be in its purest form, which, whatever, its purest form, it was, you know, Steve Chin showing pictures of his cat and stuff like that. You know, in fact, just as a little side, but it's related to this whole thing about YouTube in the early days, I commented on one of the very first videos, or if not, I don't think it's the first one, but it's one of the very first and one of the earliest surviving ones that's still up on Steve Chin's channel, which is why I remember his name more than the rest, because more than other guys, because I get comments now. Something happened like a year ago. I get comments now on my comment on his video. I made a comment in 2006 on his 2005 video, one of the very first YouTube videos, and mine, it still survives. My comment still survives because a lot of people, apparently if you had an account back in the day and you closed your account, I don't know if this is the same for all accounts, but old accounts, if you closed your account, those comments no longer exist. They're gone. You know, they're not there for historical posterity or anything. They're just gone. Since I never closed my channel, my comments remain. And so over the last year or two, it seems to be a thing with, I guess, younger, I don't know, Generation Zers or whoever it is, that's going out there and finding the oldest comments and then remarking about how old that comment is, apparently. Some of them say my comment is older than they are, which is actually true, since it's around 16 years old and most of these people are like in their teens, which is funny to think that YouTube has been around so long that you got people who are in high school now from when it first began. Anyway, so like I said, that kind of ties into this, but my own personal history, though, is that when I took those segments, YouTube was, not YouTube, excuse me, The Happy Show, my public access show, was a show done up as a variety show. It started being kind of a weird interview show that had no guest. And that wasn't even really predominantly my idea. My friend was tossing that at me because he was, the same friend who told me about YouTube was willing to do film a show for me if I wanted to add a show to public access. He was basically trying to drum up more productions on public access that weren't just church-related programs. And which ironically later on he would focus, because he was a religious guy, he'd focus more on religious programming himself. But in the early days he was trying to pump up the variety on there in the Evansville area, and so he was encouraging me, who I had already guested on his shows. He had done a number of different shows and such, and I had been a guest on those a few times, and I enjoyed making them. I was running my shop, though. You know, this was during the period, the whole time I did The Happy Show, I was running the shop, Comics Unlimited, the brick and mortar shop. And so I had to find time to squeeze in to do these shows. But he volunteered to be the cameraman, so to speak, and submitted to public access for me. And I thought, well, okay, if he's going to film it and everything, so we'd go over to his place, which had a living room that he kind of used as a studio of sorts. That was kind of nice, a nice open space. I would film at the desk with me and my other friend, a friend named Robert, who would act, in a sense, like a co-host to me. And the first 3 or 4 episodes is just us chatting, literally just sitting there chatting about whatever news, mostly entertainment type news and stuff that came in. Didn't actually have, like, say, any guests, but it was set up to be like a talk show. But I don't think we didn't have anybody guest starring in those first, actually the talk show as a guest on those first episodes. And then by the 4th, I think it was 3 or 4 episodes, by the 4th or 5th episode, I decided, I decided because I'm basically a control freak. I'll cop to that because I'm almost proud of it. And I didn't want, it was nice having Dave, who was my friend who filmed the show. It was nice having David film the show for me. And you submit it, but I didn't really want somebody else filming a show. I wanted to take over and do whatever kind of editing. I didn't have any editing programs at the time for computers or anything, but I quickly got one, and I bought my own first digital camera to use, because I had been prior to that, when I made the Happy Shows, or the stuff we had filmed on the Happy Show was on Dave's camcorder, and my oldest, actually, the first couple of, I think the first episode or two I did after Dave, I used my old handheld 80s one, shoulder held, it should be called, shoulder held, old camcorder, but then I got a more modern one, with smaller one, in the early 2000s there, got a little bit more up to date, and start taking over filming and editing the show myself, and of course got used to how to edit. Used Pinnacle Pro at the time, which wasn't too bad of a program, and I never used a truly high-end one, because I advanced to Sony Vegas Pro. I like Sony Vegas. I still honestly use it to this day. I never got through the learning curve because I didn't take the time on Adobe Premiere and other fancier, Final Cut or anything like that. Sony does what I needed to do even to this day. And at this point, I got a program that's old by today's standards. It's over a decade old. It was not as far back as when I started these videos, but it's ancient by new technology, I guess. But as long as it works, I still use it. Anyway, so I took over doing the show, The Happy Show, and I wanted it to be more of a variety show, an oddball variety show. I wanted goofy stuff. I want puppets just to be absurd. I wanted wackiness of all kinds. So we kept it family friendly, partly because that's just in my nature, honestly. I don't usually go too extreme, even though there's always a level of subversiveness, I think, to a lot of stuff I do, but I don't blatantly make it where you couldn't show it in front of a general audience. And I did get a lot of interesting feedback on the way the show was ran, because regardless of, like I said, how family friendly it still was subversive, like I said, quirky, weird, and strange, intentionally so. When I introduced puppets into the show, it wasn't done to make it a children's show at all. It was done almost a send-up of shows that would have children's shows, but not really a strict send-up. It was a mixture, I've always said, of doing stuff like Pee-wee's Herman's Playhouse, which was considered a kid's show, but was subversive and quirky enough that adults enjoyed it on their own. And also like Elvira's and all those horror show hosts, late night movie host, Svengoolie, now, well, he's been around forever, but he's still around. It was kind of a mix of all these. You had the weird host. Originally, it was a weird host. It was pretty much laid back and more normal, I guess, in the very beginning, because my friend Robert went from being my co-host of like a talk show host to my co-host on the Happy Show when they were the variety show version, and we opened up the first few episodes that weren't talk show version. We'd open up in different Evansville locations where we would like on top of a building or downtown or in the Garvin's Park, just to have really I did it for scenic locations. I thought that was nice, and some of it did turn out nice. And then my friend got tired of going around town, and so we just started filming at his house for the last couple episodes where we were both hosting together. And then I presented some other segments that me and him put together. Some of it was like he did like a ranting segment on things and such. It's funny, for a show called The Happy Show, there was a lot of things like we would do ranting and stuff like that wouldn't actually go with wouldn't really apply to a show called The Happy Show, you would think. But it was all being silly and good fun. But then he decided he didn't want to do the show anymore. He decided he was bored of doing the talk show. or the variety show, or the show period. He was tired of filming period. And so I said, okay. And I'd already found, I got a puppet through him, actually, that I wanted to use for the show. And the puppet was meant to be used for his own thing. He was going to be a comedian who couldn't tell any funny jokes. The whole joke was he was a bad comedian, basically. I did a voice for the character one time, and I will never release this. I don't care what people say. I still have the footage somewhere, but it's actually recorded separately where I did the voice, because I'm not a ventriloquist, I don't even attempt to be, where it's the Happy the Puppet. Most people who've seen my Happy Show would know, if not most people, anybody who's seen the Happy Show would know who Happy the Puppet is. Because if you've seen the Happy Show, he's a predominant part of it. He's the co-host. Eventually, that's what I'm leading up to here. So Happy the Puppet, like I said, wasn't meant to be the co-host. The show was not named for the puppet, as you could tell, because he wasn't around from the beginning. The puppet was named for the show. And so he would, like I said, tell bad jokes, and that was the whole gag. But I did recording of his voice, and I did like some pitch shift on the computer editing and stuff. And this is so early into my editing phase that I was trying to sync up live audio with me filming the puppet miming to my live audio coming through the speakers. I hadn't yet figured out, or didn't have the capability, I can't remember which, on that old editing program to record the audio on there and apply it through the editing process on Pinnacle Pro. So I was actually trying to mime this live, and I was holding up my hand so I was out of the camera, and the way I had to film it, it was a pain in the arm, so to speak, because I had to keep my arm hoisted with the puppet so I'm out of range. It was just awkward. It felt uncomfortable, and I hated the way the audio sounded and all this. So I just thought, screw it. And I don't remember if I decided right then or there, or if it was after I did a guest appearance on my friend Dave's other public access show, one of his public access shows. He had the Kitchen Magician, the culinary conjurer of Mealtime Magic. And he was the regular cooking show, and he wasn't a chef, which made it fun. It was a true cooking show, though. But this episode wasn't, actually. I was decided to bring Happy the Puppet, and this was almost his introduction, really. He appeared on the show telling a bad joke in what now is the footage, like I said, that won't ever be reshown. But he was, this first time he was actually presented as the co-host of some sort, because I decided he was going to become my co-host. I also filmed, I think, the Halloween episode at the same time for that year with Happy. And I decided Happy was not going to speak, because it's, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a ventriloquist, and I thought the show's supposed to be kind of screwy, offbeat anyway, so why don't I have a puppet who doesn't speak? So I call him the mostly mute puppet, and I always refer to him mostly mute because technically I had him speak once, so he wasn't really mute. And it's more or less that he just didn't speak on camera. So I had him on the episode of the Kitchen Magician, where we guest starred, and we cooked a magical meal. Now, one of the reasons I suggested a magical imaginary meal, by imaginary meaning we act like we're fixing a meal, but the ingredients all are invisible. You never actually see anything. And besides just going with the sensibility of what the Happy Show would do, the other reason I suggested that for the Kitchen Magician episode is I told David I didn't want to get the puppet dirty. And if I was going to use the puppet for a cooking segment, I didn't want him getting any kind of stains or anything. So I said, no. If you hear that drumming, that's the high school band practicing their drums. Anyway, so Happy was introduced, like I said, on that show, and we did a magical imaginary meal. And then he was concurrently introduced on The Happy Show as the new co-host. So there's some of the history of The Happy Show. When I start introduced, that's when things start to gel for The Happy Show, honestly. Because once I had him as the co-host, it's still rough and raw, a lot of those earliest episodes. Not that any of them were ever polished. It's always, just been me with my camera and my computer editing, and no real fancy setup for lighting or sound or anything. But you still can tell. You can still tell a marked difference between those earliest episodes. A big difference, I think, and later stuff that we did on the show. Me and other people who helped out on the show eventually later on. But with Happy in place, Robert would come back and do a few things here and there, but for the most part, he didn't have too much involvement after that. But Gavin Eddings, who was a young high school student at the time, he was about halfway through high school, I guess. But anyway, he was on the show and did movie reviews, and it was fun to have somebody else do the reviews. Though I'll be honest, I was worried about the topicalness of movie reviews. He wanted to do movie reviews at the time. That was his thing. And when you got a show that you're putting together and there's no money to be made, you're doing it for the fun of it. You just take anybody who's willing to be part of the show, who wants to be part of the show. If he wants to do movie reviews, fine, I'll let him do movie reviews. But to be honest, and if Gavin sees this, I mean, I'm not trying to knock him, but he's a funny guy, and I was glad to have him on the show. But because they're so topical, that meant they were kind of basically disposable in a sense. And what I mean, what good does if I was to show those clips again, some of my clips you can still show now, and they still, if they held up at all, arguably they still would held up now. Movie reviews, they're dated. They're by their nature, they're going to be dated. So I started to add little comic bits into his thing, arrange for certain comedic things. I hope he didn't mind it too much. I don't know how much he appreciated it really, but I would have his reviews interrupted by some guest or what have you, or I use his one of his reviews, for instance, as a springboard for somebody to come and supposedly steal his DVDs, which led into another skit. So I use that as a backdoor into another skit on the show. Ultimately, though, he went, the guy started to go to college, and he actually became a stand-up comedian for a good long while. I was hoping that'd be something he pursued, because he did pretty good. I would love for him to have done the stand-up on The Happy Show, but he wasn't at that stage yet of his life. He was feeling. In fact, the truth is, he was pretty nervous, as anybody would be, especially a young guy like he was, on filming on camera on those early episodes. And it's funny because even me, when I filmed by myself at times, at least on those early Happy Shows especially, I was a bit more nervous about acting. Like right now, I'm more nervous just about rambling on. I'm not really nervous about filming myself anymore. I'm so used to it. But that's not weird. It is weird. No. But anyway, I do wish that he had gotten to do more stuff and skits on the show, but by the time he got into college and stuff, he moved on. He did appear in a few other shows, just like Robert, but would not be as active after that short period. But around 2006, this all ties back to YouTube, which is one reason why I'm bringing it all up. Because The Happy Show is a predominant thing, especially in my earliest days of YouTube. My decade almost of YouTube on there was Happy Show centric, and so I decided to do drawing videos on The Happy Show. Honestly, I did them as a way to fill up time. It's not. I'm an artist and I like drawing, but I don't like drawing on command, and I don't like drawing for an audience, so to speak. And even though nobody else was in that room when it's filming, I know that people are going to be seeing me draw this. and so it added an intimidating factor. But never mind the fact that it was a cheap, easy way for me to fill up space. I tried to pare it down to about 10 minutes of video footage, and I called it Quick Draw originally, which some of the earliest ones were done within 10 minutes of real time. Later ones I had to speed up the process because I got more concerned about how the drawing looked on camera. So I took more time drawing some of that stuff, but none of it's the greatest work because it was just being done on camera with that pressure and all. It's not done to be a printed professional piece. It's just done to be a bit of entertainment to fill up time on my show. so I'm bringing up this thing because that's another example of something that was done with the show that led into stuff that would be on YouTube. Because when I uploaded those drawing segments on YouTube as their separate individual segments, they honestly were my most viewed videos, which makes me proud in one respect because it is my artwork being shown. But it's kind of embarrassing in one way because it's really not great artwork that I did on those. It's designed to be as pretty quick drawn, like obviously hence that name, Quick Draw. And I drew most of them with like a Sharpie, later on with a dry eraser because it would show up on camera better, so they weren't meant to be the most detailed pieces. But those segments individually up on YouTube, like I said, were amongst and are amongst to this day my most viewed videos. They're still up. Almost all my footage of the Happy Show stuff is still up, as is most of my vlogs. Now, this video's, I only got so much footage I could put on this camera. So before the file will not let me do beyond a certain amount of time. So I won't be getting too much further in this video into the YouTube thing, but I do want to continue it because I made earlier videos about the history of the Happy Show that you can look up if you want to hear what I said over 10 years ago relating this piece. I did those in separate parts. But if you want to just continue to hear my new reflections on the past, especially in contrast, me making comparisons to the way YouTube exists to this day, then I guess there's a purpose for me doing the videos as I am now. But what I was going to say, get back to this before I close this video out and continue in another video, is that I'm pretty much updated you through this video on what happened at the beginning of the Happy Show and how I start to get to the form that most people who would end up being viewers of the Happy Show would recognize as the Happy Show. And by the time this all came together, this all actually, like I said, ties into YouTube, because by the time this all came together, YouTube became a thing. It became an outlet for me to share the Happy Show. And coincidentally, I think of 2006 to 2007 in particular being the golden years of the Happy Show. 2008, I could throw that in there too, but I ended the show around 2010, so there wasn't too much longer after that. But 2003 to roughly 2010, late 2009, early 2010 was the original Happy Show years. And 2006, I felt like I really found my character on the show, because in the earliest episodes, especially the talk show version in the show with Robert as my co-host, I was me in front of the camera just talking like this. I mean, I might have been, try to make some silly jokes here and there, but pretty much it was just, me addressing the camera and just discussing things when we didn't have a skit in there or whatever. And then when Happy became the host, and by 2006, I became Matt, the host. Not just me hosting, it was a character, really. And I started doing a catchphrase I didn't even realize, but people caught on, where I'd end everything by going, "Yay!" right before we went to the next scene or next part of the show. And so apparently I got a catchphrase of my own, and it wasn't by design, it was just something I did. I used to open the show, of course, in the early days, also saying "Hello America" or "Hello Evansville" or whatever. And then on YouTube realized, well, wait a minute, I'm on the internet, so the whole world could see me now, and literally did start to see me, because I got a lot of people from England who watch my show. I was helped along with that because a guy named Jordan James, who had made some videos and did some popular videos back in those days, he promoted me on one of his shows, suggested me, and he had a big enough following, and the way YouTube was structured back then, enough people, from who watched his videos gave my videos a try. So a good segment of my videos were being watched by young people from Britain. And so that was really cool. And then other vloggers and stuff started to connect with me from all over the country and world, and would grow from there. So YouTube actually became globally known in a way, though it never was really a big thing. It was bigger than I ever really thought it would be on YouTube. Not bigger than I hoped it would be, because there was this thing back in those early days when it was ran by a smaller crew, a much smaller crew before algorithms and everything came along, where you actually had editors on the site who would screen videos and determine what would be the best one to feature on the opening screen wall, when the home page. And I'm going to get ready to stop this video here because I know I'm going to run out of footage here. But this also is a good point to get back to discussing not just my Happy Show stuff, but the early days of YouTube, because I'm going to tell you about in my next video about how they structured the home page and about featured videos and everything. That system, as it was then, exists no longer whatsoever. It's a totally different system nowadays. And I'm going to explain to you how, for many of us back then, if you were lucky enough to get featured on the homepage, which was a universal homepage, again, I'll explain more of this next video. It's like hitting the lottery. You would get hundreds of thousands of views, if not more, immediately, and you get a built-in base because most of those people would subscribe to you. It's not possible to do what they did back then, the way YouTube is structured now. It's absolutely not possible. And that's one of the interesting things about the history of YouTube. So if you can put up with me going on like this, next video, check in and I'll go on about what it was like in those early days of YouTube. And also, because Happy Show is tied in, from my personal experience, tied into those days, I'll tell you more about what happened with me and my shows and my videos on the Happy Show. But you'll get this look into the early days of YouTube. So that's it for this first part. Check in next. Yay!